You used to be somebody, didn't you? The teenage boy said it like a question, but it landed like a verdict. She didn't correct him, because he was right. She had been somebody, before the cameras stopped flashing, before her husband built a world that forgot her name. But when fate brought him face to face with the woman the tabloids called erased, every lie he'd lived began to crumble. Stay with us, because what began as a woman erased became a movement of remembrance. She was never the tragedy. They just weren't ready for her truth. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. Have you ever been dismissed, only to rise in a way they could never ignore? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Black Stories Untold with love, and ring that notification bell for more heartwarming stories that celebrate strength. The morning was cold, but not in the way winter used to feel when Summer Thompson curled up beneath cashmere blankets in a penthouse high above Manhattan. This cold was different. It lived in her bones. It settled in her clothes. It made her fingertips ache no matter how tightly she clutched the paper cup of coffee someone had left behind an hour ago. It was barely warm now, but she held it anyway. Not for the taste, but for the comfort of holding something at all. The sidewalk beneath her was cracked. People walked around her without looking down. Their shoes clicked against the pavement, fast and polished. The men in suits, the women in heels, the tourists with maps and bags. Summer used to walk like that, eyes forward, purposeful, like the city owed her space. Now the city barely noticed her. Across the street, the cafe windows gleamed. Inside, someone was laughing. A woman with smooth hair and pearl earrings touched the arm of the man beside her. His laughter matched hers, sharp and clean. Summer could almost hear the clink of fine china. Her stomach twisted, not from hunger, but memory. That used to be her table, her place, her world. She pulled her scarf tighter. It had once been silk. Now it was fraying at the edges, more thread than fabric. Her coat was too big, sleeves rolled and cinched with an old belt. Everything she wore had been given to her by someone else. Nothing fit quite right anymore. A teenage boy passed her, backpack slung low, headphones over his ears. He slowed as if recognizing something, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled dollar. He dropped it into the tin by her side without a word, but just as he started to walk away, he paused. "You used to be somebody, didn't you?" Summer did not answer. She didn't even look up, but her jaw tightened, and her hands gripped the coffee cup until it bent. The boy lingered for a moment longer, then walked on. His footsteps echoed in her chest. She let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. Used to be somebody she had been. She had been a name in glossy magazines, a woman photographed at Fashion Week, the wife of a man who built empires with his smile and his silence. But that was a different lifetime, a different version of herself, a summer that burned bright before everything turned cold. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded photograph. The edges were soft now from being handled too often. In the picture, she stood beside a man with storm-gray eyes and a confident stance. He wore a black turtleneck and a tailored coat. She wore a red dress that matched her lipstick. They were laughing. His arm was around her waist. Her hand was on his chest. She stared at the image for a long time before folding it and tucking it back into her coat. A siren blared in the distance. She looked up just enough to see a town car pull into the curb across from the cafe. A man stepped out, tall and elegant, flanked by bodyguards. His face was partially hidden behind sunglasses, but her heart stopped, because she would know that walk anywhere. Martin. She looked down quickly, pulling her scarf higher. Her heart pounded against her ribs like it wanted to break free. He had not seen her. He never looked down. Martin stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the lapel of his charcoal suit. The fabric was custom, stitched by a man in Milan who called him sir in 5 languages. His tie was navy silk, subtle but commanding. Every part of him looked ready, but his eyes told a different story. He rubbed his jaw, freshly shaved. The skin still stung slightly from the blade. A press team waited downstairs, finalizing his notes for the keynote he would deliver at the Midtown Equity Summit. Another round of applause, another photo op, another room full of handshakes with men who smiled too wide and women who laughed too fast. He would say all the right things, speak about impact and legacy, but none of it would reach beneath his skin. He walked to the window, the skyline stretching before him like a kingdom carved from glass. His name sat on a building 3 blocks away. Another stood across the river in Brooklyn. He had touched so many corners of this city, yet there were places within himself that remained dark and empty. The dreams had started a few months ago, always the same. A woman humming in a kitchen, a song playing low in the background. She would laugh, call his name, toss a dish towel over her shoulder. He could never see her face, just fragments. The curve of her cheek, the glint of sunlight on her skin, the softness of her voice. Every time he woke up reaching for her, the space beside him cold and wide. His therapist called it stress, a symptom of unresolved emotion. He called it nonsense, except for the way it lingered, the way it clung to him long after his morning espresso and carefully curated emails. He used to believe he could outrun anything, that money could fill the cracks and ambition could quiet the ache. He had been wrong. The silence at night proved it. The way his heart tightened when he passed someone on the street who almost looked like her. Someone he couldn't name. Someone he could never fully remember. His assistant buzzed through the intercom. "Car is ready." He answered with a nod she couldn't see, then grabbed his coat. In the elevator, surrounded by mirrors, he avoided his reflection. Outside, the flash of cameras met him before the cold did. Paparazzi snapped without asking. He barely blinked. This was part of the life, the spectacle, the performance. As he stepped into the car, he caught a glimpse of a woman across the street, sitting low to the ground, wrapped in layers of fabric that had lost their shape. Her posture wasn't desperate. It was still, a kind of quiet resignation he couldn't place. Something inside him stirred. His driver opened the door. Dash hesitated for half a second, then got in. She didn't look up, but he almost did. The rain had started as a drizzle, soft enough to ignore. But by the time Dash Martin stepped out of the boardroom and onto the marble landing, it was falling in thin, silver lines across the city. His assistant followed behind, rattling off calendar updates, but the words drifted past him like static. He waved her off, told her to reschedule the next meeting. No explanation, just done. His driver was already pulling up to the curb when he saw her again. She was seated on a flattened piece of cardboard near the edge of the stone steps, legs tucked beneath a heavy coat that had lost its shape. Her head was bowed, hair tucked into a scarf that had seen too many storms, but her eyes, when they lifted, held him still. Amber, like maple syrup backlit by fire. His breath caught. He didn't move. She blinked and looked away first, as if she hadn't seen him at all, as if the connection he felt hadn't been real. His jaw clenched. He stepped down 2 stairs, closer, close enough to see the way her fingers trembled beneath the threadbare gloves. His heart kicked hard against his ribs. She looked like someone he had known, or dreamt about, or lost. Maybe all 3. The driver opened the car door. Dash didn't move. Rain collected at the edges of his collar. His coat, perfectly tailored, was not made for standing still. He narrowed his eyes, trying to place her, the slope of her cheek, the shape of her lips, but the years had done their work, and life had done more. He looked at her again. No, it couldn't be. She was thinner. her frame smaller than he remembered, and her skin, once radiant, looked tired now, like it had weathered more storms than any woman should. Still, something inside him pulled. He took one more step, then stopped. This wasn't her. It couldn't be. He was letting his dreams bleed into daylight, his mind playing tricks. He straightened his shoulders, told himself it was just another stranger, just another woman lost in the shuffle of a city that never paused long enough to care. Still, as he slid into the back seat and the car pulled away, he found himself glancing back, just once. She hadn't looked again, but he had. For the rest of the ride, he couldn't focus. Not on the emails waiting, not on the headlines flashing across his phone. The image stayed with him. Those eyes, that stillness, that haunting familiarity that refused to let go. He didn't know her name, but his soul swore it did. The sky was still gray from the rain, the kind of gray that seeped into the cracks of your skin and stayed there. Summer moved slowly along the alley beside the cafe, the wheels of the broken cart she pushed squeaking against the wet pavement. Inside the cart were bottles, crumpled cans, a few pieces of cardboard she could trade in for coins. Her fingers were numb, but she worked without thinking. Survival didn't leave room for thought. The cold wasn't what hurt most. It was the laughter. It rang out behind her, sharp and too familiar. She froze before she turned. She already knew the voices. 3 women in designer coats walked by, arms looped, umbrellas swaying. One of them wore red heels Summer had once ordered herself, back when she could afford $600 for a pair of shoes that pinched. The woman closest to her tilted her head and whispered, just loud enough for it to land where it could do the most damage. "That can't be her." The others laughed. The sound sliced through her like glass. They didn't stop walking. Summer stood still, suddenly aware of everything. Her coat smelled like damp cardboard. Her boots had holes in the soles. Her scarf, once silk, was stained at the edges. She reached up and tightened it anyway, as if she could disappear inside it. They had worked together once, in a corner office lined with mirrors and polished wood. She had designed a collection that made headlines. Their label had climbed fast, too fast maybe, but she had been someone. Now she was a story they told at brunch. She kept moving. The cartwheels caught on a crack in the concrete, but she didn't stop. Just kept pushing step after step until the city quieted around her. She made her way under the overpass, where the noise of traffic above felt like protection. She lowered the cart and sat beside it, her back against a cold pillar. From her coat pocket, she pulled out the photograph. The edges were curled from time and rain, but the image was still clear. Dash had his arm around her, his smile wide, his eyes soft. She was laughing, her head tilted back, hair shining in the sunlight. They looked like a dream, not the perfect kind, but the real kind, the kind that takes years to build and seconds to lose. There had been no shouting, no courtroom, just silence. One morning he had walked out with a briefcase and never come back. No explanation, no fight, just a closing door and an assistant who returned her calls with carefully crafted apologies. And then, nothing. She became a ghost long before she lost the apartment, before she stopped answering to Mrs. Martin, before she learned how little space the world made for someone without a name. She traced his face with her thumb, not with anger, not even with longing, just with the weight of everything unsaid. Above her, a siren screamed. A train passed overhead. The steel rattled like a scream too long held back. Summer closed her eyes and leaned her head against the wall behind her. The photo slipped from her fingers, and still she remembered the way he used to look at her like she was the only real thing in the room. The ballroom pulsed with soft jazz and clinking glasses. Waiters moved like shadows, weaving through crystalline candlelight. Dash stood at the podium, his voice steady, practiced. He spoke of opportunity, resilience, and the foundation's commitment to those society overlooked. The room responded with polite nods and carefully timed applause. Every word was polished, every gesture measured. Yet beneath the surface, his thoughts felt fractured. Then the lights flickered, not enough to cause panic, just enough to still the room. A second passed, then a third. He kept speaking, but his eyes darted to the back, where a staffer had appeared, her face pale, urgency wrapped tight around her every step. She approached the stage and leaned in, her voice barely carried. Someone collapsed outside. A woman paused, mid-sentence. He felt the shift before he understood it. The crowd waited for him to recover, to charm, to move on. But he was already stepping away from the podium. In the hallway, the air felt colder. The glittering noise of the gala faded behind thick doors. Security was speaking into radios. A medic knelt near the steps. And there she was, lying still, rain on her cheeks, hair clinging to her scarf, a threadbare coat soaked through, her hands curled as if still holding on to something invisible. Her face, though thinner and tired, was unmistakable. Summer. His knees hit the marble before his mind caught up. The floor was freezing. His suit clung to him from the damp air, but he didn't care. He reached for her hand, fingers trembling, the same hand that had once traced the lines of his jaw while he slept. He said her name, not loud, not sharp, just enough for the world to still. Summer. Her lashes fluttered but didn't open. Her breathing was shallow, too shallow. The medic leaned in. "We need to move her now." Dash didn't let go. "Sir, please, we need space." He rose slowly, stepping back only when the stretcher arrived. Cameras had found the hallway. Faces pressed at the glass. Whispers swirled, but none of it mattered. All he could see was her. As they wheeled her away, something clattered to the ground. A photograph. Water-stained, bent at the edges. He picked it up. It was them. Before the headlines, before the boardrooms, before the silence. She had kept it. His heart thudded against his ribs, a sound he hadn't felt in years. Not like this, not raw, not real. His assistant appeared beside him, speaking fast. "The donors are waiting. Should we send out a statement? Should we reschedule the rest of the evening?" Dash looked at the doors to the ballroom. Then, at the elevator the stretcher had disappeared into. Then, at the photograph in his hand. "Tell them something came up." He turned and walked away, the sound of his own voice in his ears. Summer. The beeping came first, slow, steady, mechanical. Then the sterile scent of disinfectant. Then the sharp tug of pain behind her eyes. Summer blinked against the harsh light above her, her breath shallow, chest aching. Her lips were dry. Her body felt too heavy. She turned her head slowly, and there he was. Dash sat in a chair beside her bed, elbows on his knees, hands clasped as if in silent prayer. The starched perfection was gone. His tie was undone. His shirt sleeves were rolled back. The suit jacket had been tossed aside. He looked tired, unshaven, human. Her breath caught. He lifted his head, his eyes locked on hers. A flicker of something broke across his face. Shock, relief. Something softer underneath. Something she remembered from long ago. "You're alive." The words were barely more than a whisper, but they carried the weight of a man trying to believe in something again. His voice cracked at the edges. Summer turned away. "You made sure I wasn't." "A long time ago." The silence that followed was heavier than the machines around them. No cameras, no lights. Just the low hum of a hospital room and years of unfinished sentences hovering in the air between them. She stared at the wall, at the faded blue paint, at the small window where light tried to come through. Her throat burned, but not from illness. It was the ache of being seen too late. "I looked for you," he said quietly. "No, you didn't." He exhaled. A long breath like he had been holding it for years. "I didn't know how to fix what I broke." She didn't answer. There were 1,000 things she could have said. About the phone calls unanswered, the letters returned, the eviction notice, the hollow sound of his name on her lips while the world kept spinning without her. Instead, she closed her eyes. Dash stood, moved closer, not touching, just there, present in a way he had never been when it mattered most. The doctor said it was exhaustion, malnutrition, the cold. They didn't say the truth. It was heartbreak. He reached into his coat and pulled something out. The photograph. Wrinkled now. Damp at the corners, but still whole. "You kept this summer," opened her eyes again. Looked at it. Looked at him. "Of course I did." The words didn't come from pride or longing, just truth. He placed it on the nightstand, next to the glass of water no one had offered yet. "I don't expect forgiveness." "Good, but I want to help. However you'll let me." She watched him, really watched him. The cracks were there now, in his voice, in his shoulders, in the way his hands wouldn't stay still. "Help," she said the word slowly, tasted it, measured it. "You don't even know how to see me anymore." He looked up. "I see you now." Summer turned back to the window. The light had changed, slightly warmer, slightly brighter, still distant. "Then learn." Her voice was quiet, steady, unflinching. "If you want to help me, then learn how to see what you erased." The hum of the hospital faded into the background as Dash stared out the window. Summer had fallen asleep again, her breathing slow and even. He remained in the chair, still as stone, but his mind was anything but quiet. The memories returned in fragments at first. Summer in a cramped apartment, barefoot, hair in a scarf, soldering wires while he scribbled sketches on the backs of napkins. Her laugh echoing off the chipped kitchen tiles when he short-circuited the toaster for the 3rd time that week. The two of them eating noodles on the floor, plans sprawled between them like treasure maps. She had believed in him when no one else would, before boardrooms, before luxury cars, before the cameras. There was only her and a dream that didn't yet have a name. She sold her gold bracelet to pay for the prototype parts, the one his grandmother had given her. He hadn't forgotten that, not really. He just hadn't let himself remember. Another memory came sharper. The first investor meeting. He had worn a borrowed suit. She had sat beside him, her hand under the table, holding his with a strength that steadied him. He pitched. She spoke up when his voice cracked. They had walked out feeling like they'd already won the world, but the world had a price. It came in the form of a man named Calloway. He wore bespoke arrogance and handed Dash a folder filled with dreams, funding, press, a chance to scale his invention beyond what he imagined. "There's just one thing," Calloway had said. "The image matters. Investors don't want messy. They want clean lines, no baggage, no background that feels too fractured." He had meant Summer. Dash had smiled, said he understood, told himself it was just business, just for now, just until the next round. He didn't tell her what was said. He simply began to pull away, missed dinners, missed meetings, took the calls in other rooms, spoke to her less, held her differently. The morning she left, she didn't slam the door. There was no note, only silence and an empty closet. She had taken only the bracelet's box, now bare, and the photo from the hallway wall. He told himself it was better this way. Cleaner. His empire had risen quickly after that. New logos, sleek offices, fast headlines. The money came in waves, but her voice never left his mind. It echoed through every launch, every gala, every late night staring at glass towers built on a foundation she helped lay. He rubbed his face with both hands, suddenly ashamed of the suit he still wore like armor, ashamed of the years he had erased her with nothing more than silence. He looked back at her now, fragile but breathing, alive. Summer had never been imperfect. She had just been inconvenient to the image they wanted, and he had let her pay the price. "No more," he whispered. "Not again." The hospital room had become a strange sort of stage. The sterile walls hummed with tension now, not medicine. Summer sat upright, her eyes sharper, her voice steady. Dash stood a few feet away, holding a folder of paperwork his assistant had dropped off that morning. Keys, deeds, bank documents, options, offers. She didn't look at any of it. He tried to soften his tone. A townhouse on the Upper West Side. No strings, no press, just space, dignity, a second chance. She stared at him for a long time before answering. "I don't need saving, I need acknowledgement." Her words hit like stone, not thrown in anger, placed with purpose. He opened his mouth to respond, but she raised a hand. "Not from the world, from you." She didn't want the apartment or the check or the PR package his people had carefully crafted. She didn't want pity. She wanted truth. Outside, it was already too late for silence. Someone had seen him leave the emergency room that night. Then came the whispers, then the headlines, then the photo, the billionaire's erased wife. By morning, the tabloids had swarmed. Reporters lined the sidewalk in front of the hospital, flashing cameras and yelling questions. Staff had to cover Summer's name on her door. Nurses looked at Dash differently now, some with judgment, others with curiosity. He could feel it, the fracture forming in his world. His assistant called him 3 times before noon. "You need to control the story." He ignored all of them. That afternoon, he walked into a room filled with microphones and unfamiliar eyes. The press conference had been scheduled for another reason, a routine update on the Foundation's outreach initiative. But the air was tight. Every reporter knew why they were really there. He stepped up to the podium. No suit jacket, no prepared speech, just a rawness in his voice that hadn't been there before. "Before we begin, there's something I need to say." The cameras blinked. The silence waited. "You've read the headlines. You've seen the stories. And I won't correct them." He paused. "Because they're true, he let it hang. Let the room feel the weight of it. Years ago, before any of this, I was building something with a woman named Summer Thompson. She was my partner in every way. She believed in the work before it was profitable. She gave more than she had. And when the world asked me to choose between her and the version of success they sold me, I chose wrong." A murmur rippled through the room. He steadied his voice. "She didn't vanish. She was erased. And I let it happen." He looked into the cameras as if speaking directly to her now. "I built an empire, yes, but the foundation was hers. And the cost of forgetting that nearly destroyed her. And me." When the questions came, he didn't answer them. He walked off the stage. Outside the building, the city roared on. But for the first time, he wasn't hiding. He was finally telling the truth. The camera crews came first, then the bloggers, then the former colleagues who had once forgotten her name and now remembered it a little too loudly. The hospital became a cage lined with questions and lights, and Summer felt the air thinning with every passing hour. She didn't say goodbye, just slipped out early one morning, wrapped in the same worn coat that had seen too many seasons. No cameras caught her leaving, no headlines tracked her steps. She walked until the street stopped staring. A small brick building on the east side welcomed her with a simple hand-lettered sign taped to the glass. Hot meals served daily. No questions asked. Inside, the scent of lentils and fresh bread filled the air. Folding chairs scraped against the tile floor. A child's laugh echoed in the hallway. No one here cared about tabloids or scandals. No one called her by her last name. She picked up a tray and served lunch to women who didn't ask why her wrists were thin or why she flinched at sudden noise. She held the hands of mothers who had nothing left to lose. She read books to children who only knew that her voice was kind. With every bowl of soup and every soft smile, Summer began to feel like herself again. Not the erased wife, not the headline, just someone useful, someone human. Dash found her 2 days later. He didn't announce himself, just stood in the corner of the room, hands in his coat pockets, watching her tie a child's shoe with quiet care. She laughed at something the girl said. A full laugh, the kind he hadn't heard in years. The sound of her being whole without him. He had been so certain she needed saving, but here she was, saving others. She saw him finally. Her expression didn't change. She handed the little girl a juice box and rose to her feet. "You shouldn't be here." Her voice was calm, but there was no softness in it. "I didn't come to take you back," he said. "I came to see you, and what do you see now?" He looked around, at the peeling paint, at the broken chairs, at the way the people in this room leaned toward her like she was light in a place that forgot how to shine. "I see who I lost, and what I never deserved." She crossed her arms. "You don't belong here, I know." He stepped closer. "But maybe I can learn. If you'll let me walk beside you, not ahead, not behind, just here." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned back to the sink and rinsed a pot. The water ran warm over her fingers. After a moment, she handed him a towel. Dry. He took it. In the quiet side by side, they didn't speak of the past. Not yet. They simply washed dishes. A billionaire with hands too soft for this work. A woman who had once built empires and now built something far better. Peace. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't try to fix anything. He just stayed. The sun came in slow, soft, golden. It touched the wooden floors of the newly painted dining hall, warmed the worn edges of tables now draped in linen, and stretched long across the freshly stenciled lettering on the far wall. The Summer Thompson Home for Second Chances. The paint was barely dry, but the message had always been there. It just took time for the world to see it. Inside, the smell of cinnamon rolls mixed with brewed coffee and something quieter. Safety. Summer moved through the space like she had always belonged. Clipboards in hand. A gentle word here. A soft nudge there. The women in the shelter no longer looked away when they spoke. They looked up. Children reached for her hand without hesitation. Her calm steadied the room before anyone realized they needed it. Dash was by the sink, sleeves rolled, apron on, smiling without calculation. He had learned to listen more than talk, to serve instead of lead. Every weekend, he showed up without fanfare. He didn't miss galas. He didn't miss board meetings. He missed none of it. He missed her for too long. Now, he missed nothing. Summer approached with a cup of coffee, steam curling upward in lazy spirals. She held it out to him, fingers brushing his just slightly. He took it without a word, the heat grounding him. She smiled. That smile. "You finally remembered." Her voice was quiet, but it carried all the weight of the years between them. Dash looked down at the coffee, at the chipped mug, at her hand still near his. "I never stopped seeing you," he said. "I just had to learn how to look." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes shimmered, not with tears, with something softer, something whole. They stood there for a moment, still in a room that used to echo with sorrow and now pulsed with purpose. Outside, the city moved as it always had, fast, unforgiving. But here, in this small corner rebuilt from ruin, time slowed. The world narrowed to two scarred hands reaching for something true. He looked at her, not like a man who had lost everything, but like one who had finally learned the value of what he nearly let go. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. No promises, no speeches, just presence. The sun caught the curve of her jaw, the arch of his brow, the shadows they no longer feared. And together, in the quiet light of a second sunrise, they stood, not as a rescue story, not as a headline, but as two people who had been broken, forgotten, and erased, and had still chosen to begin again. If her journey moved you, share it for those still waiting to be seen again. Sometimes healing isn't about going back. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. Drop your city in the comments and tell us, have you ever turned loss into light? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, drop a comment, and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe to Black Stories Untold for more stories that uncover hidden struggles, celebrate strength, and remind us that every voice matters.